Thanks for hanging in there on a Friday afternoon. Glad to have everybody here, and I want to say thank you to Keith and Stephanie and Lifespan for the opportunity to speak about this topic. It's near and dear to my heart. You'll find out through the presentation why, but really passionate about the field of brain health and extending healthy lifespan. And I'm trying to overlap, my career is not in neuroscience or biology. I've been kind of a self-study in that for the past 4 or 5 years. But I really feel like there's an opportunity now to fuse what I work on in technology and software to really make an impact in this field. And I do think neuroscience is one of those fields where it's going to have a huge impact given where we're going at miniaturization, big data, and the potential for digital therapeutics. And so for me, one of the first opportunities to look at was how do you change the game in how we address brain health and the funding for things like Alzheimer's disease, which has been just an incredible challenge for us for many decades now. And I felt like crypto-economic mechanisms could be a real game changer in this area. And so what I want to talk about today, we do a lot of things with 21 Impact Labs. The 21 stands for 21st century solutions to 21st century challenges. I really think new approaches need to be taken and can be taken now, and that's what we're trying to do, but really dedicated to the field of brain health. We will be releasing a brain health app later this year, and it's focused really on neuroplasticity and training and education to really extend cognitive performance, but I won't talk about that today, but keep an eye out for it from us later. What I want to talk about today are mechanisms, a mechanism that I like to call as an impact DAO. And what I mean by that is it's a way to coordinate talent and capital on a global basis using tokens, where you have a token-funded community that has a shared passion and interest in a shared mission. And I think this is a new way to form talent and capital to tackle global scale problems. And brain health and longevity and certainly neurodegeneration is one of those. So I'm going to start by walking through a little bit of a history of brain health because it's important to understand how we got to where we are and why we need, I feel, new mechanisms to go attack this problem. And I want to start out with just, can you imagine yourself in a world where brain aging is not inevitable? And I'm sure this audience, it's probably not a far thing to think about, and you probably already assume it is not inevitable. But for society at large, norms are very powerful. And so we already have phrases like senior moments, brain fog, and the more crude brain fart. And these things are part of our daily life, and we just assume that I'm getting older, my brain's gonna start losing capability, and there's nothing I can do about it. And it's really sad to have that as the state of mind, and I really think it needs to change. But the reality is we are living longer. Medical advancements have extended our age. We have a globally aging population. And you know, the data does show that our bodies are now outliving our brains. And so we're extending our healthy lifespan, but we're not extending our healthy brain span, and we really haven't done much about that yet. And it's time to change that. And you don't have to look too far for this. You look at the statistics on Alzheimer's, and it's a raging epidemic that's coming at us. These numbers are just devastating as the disease is itself to people and their families. And it's time that we take a different approach to it. And you know, the other part of the data is you know, cognitive performance. And so when you look at cognitive performance, our brains, our frontal lobes aren't really fully developed until we're in our mid-20s probably. Somewhere in our 20s, it varies by person. The data show that our cognitive performance starts to decline after our 40s, or sometime in our 40s, and it falls off, as you see from the curve, rather rapidly. And that's if you don't do anything about it, but it's still happening. So if you think about that for a moment, that means, you know, now that we're living into our 80s, 90s, 100s, and we aspire to live to 150 or beyond, we have only 15 years of peak cognitive performance. 15 years where it's either increasing or it's at its peak. That doesn't lead to, a lot of passion about being in your 80s or 90s, or hundreds when your best brain years were in your 40s. So something needs to change here, and I think it can. I will get to happier slides in a moment, but one more kind of depressing part of history. I think we've had many lost decades on this opportunity. Alzheimer's itself and brain health hasn't suffered from a lack of funding. There's a lot of funding out there for it, billions and billions of dollars. The issue is a centralization issue, a coordination issue, and an approach to how we're tackling disease, in particular neurodegeneration. So the centralization issue is 90% of the funding comes from two sources. It comes from the NIH and it comes from the Alzheimer's Association. It's not bad, they're doing great work, they're funding great projects. It's just that it tends to lead to less risk-taking and fewer shots on goal and fewer strategies being tried to approach this disease. And there's a lot of bureaucracy and centralization, and then over time, people, institutions and researchers figure out how to get that money so it keeps going to the same places. And it over and over and over it goes. The other problem has been we're attacking the disease way too late. And again, this goes to what strategies we're funding. If we treated heart disease the same way we treat brain health, we'd be trying to test statins really on people who have congestive heart failure. And it's just not gonna work, right? That's not the time to give a statin. The time is earlier to clear cholesterol. We need to do the same approach with brain health. What happens with pathology of Alzheimer's is it's developing in brains decades before symptoms show up. By the time the symptoms hit, it's a very complex mess between plaques, tangles, and neuroinflammation. It's a real difficult challenge to turn around at that point in time. We really need proactive preventative care on this. And that's what I mean by taking more shots on goal and creating a new entity with capital and talent that can fund more ambitious targets and earlier in the stage of development. And so the good news is the research is now showing that we can do a lot to improve and extend our brain health and our brain performance. And so the Lancet study just released a report, I believe a few years ago, that states that about 12 modifiable lifestyle factors can be targeted, and that will delay, if not prevent, the onset of neurodegeneration. And it will even do it in people who have genetic markers that put them at higher risk for the disease. And so what used to be thought of as, I don't want to know if I'm at risk and I don't want to know about this disease because there's nothing I can do about it, now there are things you can do about it. And what I've found anecdotally with talking with people who have a family history of this is they want to know what they can do about it and they want to be proactive about doing it. So we have a cohort of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond that are saying, I have a family history, I've seen what it can do, I don't want that happening to me and my children. So I want to do something about it, I want to play a role in it. And so just to put a number on that, there's an estimate of about 40 million Americans that are pre-symptomatic, they have pre-symptomatic pathology for Alzheimer's right now. It's 40 million, and that's just in this country. If you look at people who have Alzheimer's and you extrapolate, well, how many children and grandchildren do they have, you get to similar numbers. And so I feel like we've got an opportunity where you have tens of millions of people, if not more, that care so passionately about solving this problem that they want to be part of an organization and they want to do it in a way they can participate and change the game here. And we've done some surveys on this, and there is no doubt that the numbers are staggering. They're in the 80% plus range where people want to do something about their brain health, and they're spanning different age groups, and the numbers are especially compelling for people who have a known family history of Alzheimer's disease. So we're starting Cerebrum DAO. It is a bio DAO, but I like to call it an impact DAO. So very similar to what you've already heard about from Athena DAO and Vita DAO. We are focused on brain health and extending healthy brain span. And so I like to say that we're coordinating talent and capital on a global scale to go after this challenge, and really that's what I think these blockchains and tokens are exceptional at. It is, the brain longevity really is the final frontier of human health. We seem to be moving our lifespans longer, as I said, but the brain, is not necessarily keeping up. This is a personal passion project of mine. The young girl in the photo is my daughter, my youngest. The art piece was created by my oldest daughter, her sister. But so my youngest daughter has Down syndrome. And what I discovered when she was born, and what put me into action a few years ago, is that the population of people with Down syndrome are literally 100% guaranteed to get early onset Alzheimer's. And so that population will face pathology developing in their 30s and symptomatic in their 50s and 60s. And they're living extended lifespans now, but they're not making it past their 60s for the most part. And so I felt with her being about 8 years old when I got started on this project, I had about 20 years to stop the pathology. And I knew that the extrapolation of the 6 million people with Down syndrome, if we can solve it for them, we're going to be able to solve it for every human around brain health and extending longevity. And so we all do need protection against neurodegeneration, and there's a lot we can do about it. The opportunity is massive as well. And so investments in this field have tremendous potential for economic return. And so that leads into the model for the Impact DAO, and why I do think an Impact DAO is the preferred approach to go after solving this field. So brain health affects everything. It's our CPU, it runs our daily life, it drives our body, and it interprets all the signals that we get from all around our daily lives that cause us stress and anxiety and happiness and all sorts of other things. So understanding it across the board, not just in the field of dementia, but also traumatic brain injury, which can lead to CTE and dementia for people that otherwise wouldn't get it, as well as wellness and mental health is critical. So we're looking across the board at all these things, and you can see massive numbers of people and massive market opportunity exists. So we created a concept. I said, well, let's go after this. And given my history, there are multiple ways I could do this. I could raise a private equity fund. These are known largely as impact funds. And the RISE fund and Bain Capital has these. There are many of them out there. But I didn't like the structure because I felt it was constraining. The research that I've seen and the discussions I've had about impact funds are, when you're raising money from the LPs, the primary thing that they are actually looking for is still the return. And it's the IRR model, and it's a limited strategy that you have to deliver those IRRs, and they've got to be deploying it in a restricted time frame over 10 years with 3, 5, and 7-year milestones. So I felt like that's going to be too constraining. It's going to put too many constraints and artificial barriers to actually free-form approaching this problem. On the other side, there was a venture philanthropy structure. And so the most famous one really is the Cystic Fibrosis Fund, which has created a tremendous success with a therapeutic and a multi-billion-dollar treasury now. My concern with that was that it's passive. So what ends up happening is you have a lot of passionate people that want to be contributing, but they contribute money, but they play on a passive basis. They're not actively involved. They can read the reports, they can go to the fundraisers, they can knock on doors, and you're constantly raising money. And then it has geographical constraints too, because the benefit for the venture philanthropies contributors is a tax deduction, and typically that gets restricted by the jurisdiction. So 501c3s, it's predominantly going to be Americans involved in it. and you can't get the global scale and reach. And so when we discovered the token mechanism in the DAO, it's kind of the best of both worlds, and it can operate at a global scale. And so what I liked about it was the people that contribute to the DAO, that buy tokens in the DAO, are passionate about the mission, but then they also have agency over how the capital gets deployed, what gets invested, and what strategies we pursue. And if they've earned the tokens by providing work to the DAO, then the same thing goes. They provide work, and then they got agency, and they got participation rights. And then with a token, we have a liquid currency that's global in nature. So as we are showing success and growing our treasury and generating returns, we can keep going back to the market and raising capital without having to do bake sales and walks for philanthropies. And so I felt like it could scale a lot better. I felt like it could scale globally, and I love the regenerative nature of it, just like a venture philanthropy. We're not distributing funds. When we get a big gain coming into our portfolio, it goes back into the treasury, and then everybody that's got governance rights over that now has a lot more capital to go after the mission that they care so much about. So everybody's motivated to invest in solid projects. We don't have time horizon constraints. We don't have investment strategy constraints. We put them on ourselves. We decide what we're going to do as a community, and we pull in a diverse body of people that have all sorts of different skills but share one thing, which is a passion for solving the problem that the DAO is going after. And so the mechanism that works, we do a public sale of tokens. My DAO, we're exploring the opportunity to use NFTs as the token themselves. These images that you see here, I guess on my right, are real images from inside brains. They're from the Human Connectome project. I think they're gorgeous. And we're looking at ways to do generative art around these in the kind of context of art blocks, and make these marketing symbols for people that are part of the DAO that want to share that they're part of this mission as well, in addition to governance rights and voting rights in the DAO. And then to Keith's point earlier with dynamic NFTs, there's an opportunity to provide other pieces of value in these NFTs, other utility. You could be part of, the DAO could be making leading researchers available for information sessions and research sharing. They could be making private consultations. We could fund a therapeutic, and people who are members in the DAO that have these tokens could get early access or discounted access to the therapeutic. So there's a lot of flexibility to continue to deliver value and utility to the people that own these tokens. And then the DAO goes to work. We develop our strategy, and then we look across the globe for opportunities to fund research, translational research that we will use the molecule IP NFT framework for, to commercialize and fractionalize and take to market and build potentially biotech companies out of that. And then we'll also invest directly into biotech companies and digital therapeutic companies and digital health companies. Anything to do with the field of brain health that our community and our working group around neuroscience decides is within our strategy to go fund. So that's the mechanism, and it's regenerative. When we generate returns from the purchase of shares in biotechs or digital health companies, or we commercialize IP that we've funded, it goes back into the treasury, and our treasury grows without having to go out and raise funds. And so that's us. We are recruiting across the board for this DAO, so you don't have to be a neuroscientist. I am not one. You don't have to have a background in biology. You have to have a passion for brain health and extending brain longevity and really taking unique and innovative shots on goal to go extend healthy brain span. We need people that are community builders, that understand tokens, that understand legal structure, that understand marketing, that understand community engagement strategies and neuroscience, and can structure investments in biotech deals. So any and all are welcome. If you scan that QR code, that will take you to our entire link tree of all the ways you can find us and participate. And you can always email me as well if you're interested. I'll stop there, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Bryan. So we've got time for questions.
Yeah, so far in terms of the kinds of projects that you're funding or looking most closely at, what kinds of patterns or differences have you noticed in those that versus the ones that get funded by the NIH? Are there any particular areas you feel like you're doing a better job of amplifying?
You know, it's not to the exclusion of the NIH. And so we're early. So we've done a private sale so far to give us a little bit of treasury so we can make a couple investments and get ourselves stood up and recruit. The public token sale will likely happen later this year or early next year. And that will grow the size of our treasury. So really we've made one investment and we're looking for about 2 more. We're still solidifying the strategy to take on this. And so we're exploring a variety of different areas that really have been that have strong scientific basis but have been underfunded. Mitophagy activation, I think, is one field. Mitochondrial dysfunction. We're looking at the gut-brain axis and the blood-brain barrier. A lot of these things. Digital therapeutics are interesting as well. I know Keith mentioned the lights, and that's actually a real thing. There's an opportunity to use light therapy to remove amyloid in the brain. But the first investment we did make, to show you we can complement things like the NIH. It's in a biotech company, and the biotech company has received NIH and foundation funding in the past that led it to where it is with the licensed opportunities. And they have a small molecule that does have NIH funding support for phase 1 trials. And then they're also pursuing what I think is more novel, and I'm a big fan of, is combination therapies. So taking FDA-approved therapeutics and or natural products and putting them in various combinations and testing them against Alzheimer's pathology. So there are about a half a dozen candidates ready for trial on that, and that might receive foundation funding, but we might also be part of funding that too. You're welcome.
I have 2 questions of my own. At what stage, I guess, do you take on projects and I guess the companies, or maybe if they're proto companies, not even companies at the time. So what stage do people usually approach you, and how do you vet these projects before you onboard them?
Yeah, stage is something we're figuring out still. The goal of the DAO is to be able to commercialize, and so we do need to generate returns for the DAO, and so we like to focus at translational stage and beyond. The investment we did make is a seed stage biotech, and it's in their seed stage private equity, so it's an equity investment. And they have a few products that are going into phase 1 trials right now. So that's the stage that we like. I think just strategically, and we're talking with other players like Vita DAO and Athena DAO on their approach to this, and every field is different. But I feel it's important because the impact DAO or a bio DAO mechanism is new, and we need to demonstrate credibility. I'm trying to find, it's almost like a barbell approach where I want some that are going to be, longer term and more adventurous, but I want some that have a really high probability of generating return in a short period of time, relatively short period of time, so we can show that these models work. And I think generating some kind of return or some kind of appreciation in value is important to show that the model works and that these things will sustain themselves. And so with the seed level equity, the hope is that some successful early trial results come in and they have a step up round in the private markets, and we see our equity appreciate in that, at least on a book value basis, and we can promote that to say we're doing good things. And both through the impact of the advancement in the trial as well as from the financial side.
So this whole concept, it seems rather new to me, which probably is. I'm just wondering how many different individuals, projects, organizations, come across your table? And do you have an SAB that helps you vet these projects, both the science and I guess and the business also, and being also important if you're going to translate this?
Yeah, that's part of the community building. So we're actively recruiting a neuroscience team. And so there'll be a neuroscience working group that will be functioning like a scientific advisory board that will be able to vet the deals that come in, the opportunities that come in. There's an open application process. Anybody can find us and apply for research grants. So if there are any researchers out there that feel like you have a project that deserves funding, you can just go to our website and submit an application, and that'll go into our working group for evaluation. And same thing on the business side too. We rely upon the power of the community and the people that we recruit into that. That said, we are working to try to find a handful of other scientific advisors at the early stage while we get this stood up. And so people like the biotech company we invested in has a pretty stellar scientific background and advisory board, so we do rely on people like that as well.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the audience? One in front row.
Thank you, Bryan. Great presentation. Regards to opening it up to public sale, are there any regulatory concern that might spring up in the future, opening up to, let's say, U.S. public?
I don't think so. We're treating that this is a governance token sale, and so VitaDAO has been successful with that already. HairDAO has been as well. The rights you're getting are governance rights. There's no promise of economic returns or upside in that. You're doing it for the mission. I happen to believe that the tokens do accrue value, and they accrue value in the utility that they're providing, as well as I think as the Treasury grows, I think the market will recognize that this organization is having impact, and they're going to have more impact as it grows, and more people are going to want to be part of it, especially with something that, look, we all have a brain, right? So, the market is everybody on the planet. This is where I do think it's a compelling way to drive capital to the mission, but given that we're focused purely on governance and utility and no economic rights, I'm not terribly concerned about the regulatory side. We have engaged, I do worry about it, so it's not to say I'm just being flip about it. We have legal counsel that advises us especially on the US side. The other thing is we are functioning as a Swiss association. So even though we're a DAO, from a legal standpoint, we are a Swiss association, which gives us a lot of other benefits. So token holders get limited liability protection, and we get to open bank accounts because I can't always invest in opportunities with tokens, and so we need currency opportunities as well. So there's governance and there's legal coverage on this, and we do assess it very seriously.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Bryan.